So that point is, yeah, we've been chatting a bit about, there is this, the documentation that's been made so far, in theory, is very egalitarian. It's like everyone has equal kind of chance to submit proposals, and that's all great, and it logically kind of maps out. There's also a lot of good logic of why you kind of move the subjectivity out of the categorization stage for simplicity, because otherwise you get this really complex justification of the categories, the budget weightings, all this complexity from a governance standpoint. The more you start to kind of break things down and have more and more categories. So this kind of like subjective side, like, oh, we're going to prioritize DeFi or Africa or this, makes sense at the proposal, this kind of community priority voting, and the actual voting stage. There's all these kind of different ways you can approach that. However, that's in theory. Now, the practice is we don't have those direct approaching things right now. So the thing that I've been mulling over and thinking about is potentially having like an interim challenge that isn't meant to be there for the long period, but maybe there's like a potential like emerging markets kind of challenge, just to accept the fact that if you're an emerging market, you probably don't have the same amount of time or resources that maybe I do to be able to, like write a really good proposal and have this kind of support, like all the kind of different things that you could have an advantage of being in like a more developed country. That does have a knock-on effect on different countries. And if the time that you would remove that is when I think we'd be confident that the directing funding approaches that are listed in the documentation, such as we have like community priority ports, we have
somebody pushed the wrong button.
Who did it?
Oh,
Okay.
Who done it?
Oops, you've
What's
done it.
happened? We're all back in the
Yeah,
setup.
you
Oh,
saw we forgot to
All
mention
right,
it.
who
but,
messed up?
You just missed it.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody.
Okay,
That's
so
just
official
all right.
time.
We
All right,
again.
listen to
Rooms
me.
again.
Shut your
All
butt.
right.
I like
You can have the
this.
quorum or what?
okay.
Yeah, let's reopen them, but I think it.
oh boy. Oh dear. I'm just going to continue eating and hope that doesn't happen again. Who else was there? Josco or something like that.
John was in here, Ajay.
How has Harry? I just don't want to miss them out. Not join. It says Joey's there.
I'm back.
I think there was some others who might join again, or they might not. So yeah, this what I was going over, I don't know when we cut out, when everyone cut out there, but this issue that we face, I think, is like the theory of having these kind of 6 categories, or trying to keep it as small as possible, those categories, bears a lot of logic. There's a lot of advantage to it. And I think in the long term, we should be very careful about when we add in more categories and how that kind of breaks down, and do it from a place of confidence with data and understanding that, why we need to break this down, rather than kind of just being like, choice, just have choice is the best. Choice in this situation is like decision paralysis. It's complexity, it's time, the time it takes to do all the challenge settings and all that kind of thing. There's a lot of cost to it. But it's accepting that's like where we want to get to. But these directing funding approaches that I've kind of outlined, there's loads of different things we can do. There's like these, so we could have like a vote where all of the community says, what do we think is high priority right now? And it's not attached to the challenge setting. So it doesn't make a mandate that you have the innovation has to turn up at this given time, this given moment. It's just to say, we value that and we're looking for that. And we're probably going to be, we're the community, we're going to be voting for it. So you still have this very fair egalitarian funding categorization, but you have this approach to be like, spend some time thinking about this because we really want to see some innovation here. So you can separate the concerns to keep the consistency at the base. But we don't have that. So this is why I think this weekend I need to kind of map out the pros and the cons of why you have emerging markets, and maybe put it into a vote at the end of after town hall next week. But yeah, I'd be interested to know what your thoughts on that. Like, does that sound like a logical thing to do? Sophie, do you want to go? Because you had your hand up.
Yeah, sure. I didn't want to necessarily respond to the specific question you asked, but just share my thoughts in general on the whole sort of broad challenge category. So I have spent quite a lot of time thinking about challenge settings and challenges and sort of where that can go. I'm not gonna say that I have the answers or that like it's not easy, right? But I do have some serious concerns with going this route, and I want to start with saying that although I understand that it's nice to make things simpler, and in general I try to simplify things. Like for my personal choices in life, I always go with simpler is better, right? That's my my approach. I feel that, but I also acknowledge that inherently decentralized solutions are more complex than centralized ones. And so like the simplest system is one person decides everything, right? Super simple. Very little overhead, right? No, yeah, yeah. There,
simple can still
it
mean
is
simple for
simpler. It's
decentralized
less rules,
governance.
right? That's just one rule. This
Mm.
person decides everything. That's the most simplest governance system in that it has only one rule, right? And the more layers you add, the more complex it gets. And if you want to have like a group of people having a discussion, reaching consensus with oversight from other people and input from all, that's inherently more complex, right? And so if we use making things simpler as a metric of thinking that that will be better, is dangerous because it will often lead to centralization of the systems that we create, right? We're centralizing a lot of the decision power in like, all right, so we're going to make a couple categories. In the end, some like who gets to decide those categories, right? Now you're very focusing on this, you're gathering some input, but it's still some people making that decision for everybody, right? So even the what people can choose on is already a decision, right? Like, so if you can vote, that's democracy. But if you only have two choices, like, is that really like who gets to pick the choices that I have, right? So that's a thing to keep in mind. And I think there's also a big risk in that it will be a bigger fight for attention, right? The bigger the challenges, the bigger the budgets of proposals. I see that, right? You have a small challenge, people put 5,000 in because if it's 50,000, I'm not going to ask for 50,000. You make a challenge for 1.2 million, people are asking for 200,000, right? And maybe they're going to use it usefully, but that remains to be seen, right? And generally bigger budget projects tend to just be a lot less efficient, right? And there's a lot of things happening in the community that are not getting funded. There's no real restriction on how much you can ask. And even if you put it in as a guideline, IOG has made it clear they're not going to enforce that, right? It's up to the voters. So if a handful of projects just take all the budget and that's it, that's the whole fund round, right? And is that really good? It will be more a fight for attention in those couple of pots where everybody's fighting for the top spot. And the voting system, I'm just going to say it, it's not fair yet, right? We're not at the point where you can say it's going to reach the right conclusions. And basically every challenge is kind of a gamble pot. And by separating it, we're kind of also, I think, maybe increasing the quality because we're diverting the attention. Right? People who really care about a certain topic are going to go in there and vote for it. And it's creating sort of specializations. You also see it with challenge teams forming more specialized systems. Doris talked about autonomous challenges several times. And another direction is going solving the same problems, right? I agree with a lot of the problems that you identify, but the solutions is something else, right? They're separate. And like another solution is just giving a lot more autonomy to challenges and a lot more institutional like differences there as well in how they're managed, making them like over time more refined. And I agree, right now it's a mess, right? I have no idea where to put my proposal, and that's annoying. But I'm afraid that if we go to the simpler version, that like we're stuck with that, and we're never going to reach that sort of fine-grained level of like sometimes some things are really focused. But yeah, I guess this I've been going on a long time, but I've been thinking about this, and I'm not sure how to give this feedback.
I
But
mean,
I do have strong
it's
objections. Yeah, so that's
it's fantastic feedback. I think yeah, so really appreciate your thought on it. It's like I'm just trying to find anyone who has contrasting opinions because it's like I I'm fully aware of some of the issues, which is like some of the issues is competition is both it's a double-edged sword. It's a good thing that you can have competition because then you can attract the whole kind of range of players and some of the existing players that are kind of ignoring it because like Cats is kind of cumbersome to get like a 50,000, 100,000 kind of budget. So having larger rounds could attract some bigger players, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But on the opposite side of that sword is like you also have the situation where you could have small players who are going to be drowned out. And this also comes in somewhat related to the rapid funding mechanisms, because if you are only requesting $10,000, there's quite a few of those proposals that make sense for a different type of funding. In terms of like the centralization thing, I think the thing to separate there is we've got this kind of governance here and the system. So by adding, let's say that, we have that one person simple system, it would still be complex if you had one person, they had to do lots of challenges. It's like the complexity still there. So how you want to do that kind of the system on the complexity side is just, exacerbated depending on, the amount of people who are going to be using it. So if you've got a complex base system, then a lot of people makes it very complex. It's still complex for one person to justify all the categorizations and the budget weightings and all that thing. But if you do that on a large scale, and it's also like you think about like, I don't do, for instance, like there's plenty of people like I don't even do I always do general elections, but I don't really do the council one as much. It's just like I don't care enough. Like it's like I choose to where I spend my time, the things I think are important enough. And do we think the general ADA holders, which is the whole kind of ADA community, want to be trying to think about does this is this DeFi challenge much more important, or no, is like lending and borrowing much more important than DEX is? The complexity for the general ADA holder to decide on a round by round basis the things that should be in and out is excessively complex, and it's very, very hard to get right. So this is why it's just not about the central. You can still have the kind of change process of these categories. You just have we could have like a PSIP process that goes, okay, this is no longer meeting our requirements. This thing is breaking. We're going to break this one up, or these two up, or whatever that change is. But you make that more of just like a change that is like the SIP process, where it's just kind of like it's a more formal thing. We know this works, and it fits all proposal types, and it solves this problem. And when you see a problem, people start discussing it and finding a way to solve it. So it's definitely not the intention for me or anyone who's been talking about it for like this to be like a fixed solution that never changes. It's just like it solves a set of problems and then can evolve with some of the governance structures and things. Like everything's obviously up for change. So I think the simplicity thing still is very important. Like it's like governance to everyone in the ADA thing. You want to make that as slick as possible and not incentivize, but encourage it. So it's as simple as possible to go through it. Because at the moment, like I just cannot get through all the proposals and stuff. And just doing the challenge settings alone, to spend the time to really kind of look at the understanding, like the actual logic and reasoning and data behind like why those categories should exist over other ones and why they're more important. Because this is the other thing with categorization is like the admission of one can mean the rejection of other. And that can quite literally mean it's like, you do not deserve the right to promote a proposal like this, which to me is just completely just not fair to the whole process. If you're saying this thing, for some reason we decided there's no innovation that can happen in this area, that's a massive red flag to me. So it's not necessarily just the simplicity, it's also the egalitarian side, which I'm super strong about trying to solve. And then the thing that isn't kind of egalitarian, the short-term issue that I'm concerned about is the emerging market stuff. So I fully take on the conversations I've had on that, and I think there's still really trying to think about what problems could cause here, because we want to have a level playing field, but then accept that we're trying to maintain like simplicity for so it's actually we can actually apply governance, but increase the complexity when we're confident and there's the data. Then we know it's like, yes, this makes sense. This means that every single ADA holder is going to have to make an extra vote on something, and it's good because of X, Y, Z, and it's like it's understood, and people make that vote. They say we want that complexity because it does all these things. So I think that would be my response on the complexity stuff, at least.
I agree with some of those things, but and here's it's kind of because there's certain problems, but often a solution creates new problems, and now I hear your arguments really focusing on the complexity of the challenge setting, right, and people having to choose there. But I feel that if we simplify that part or take that away, right, we move it to the proposer part, right? Because then you have one challenge with just all the proposals in there of all different kinds, and the voter is going to have to compare them, right? If a challenge is really specific, then when you're comparing the proposals, they're more similar. So it's easier to compare. The more different the proposal is, the harder it is to know what to vote for. And it will just be more about brand and shouting and name, right? And reach. Whereas, and so I feel like we're moving the complexity from the challenge setting and just making it really difficult to figure out which proposals should get funded within those challenges. And I
Well,
think that I agree that the challenge setting is not a sustainable way to do this in the future. But I honestly also don't think that that is the plan, right? I think that the whole reason why we have now challenge teams, we're going to do more measure on the sort of effect of challenges, and why they want the challenge teams to focus on reporting on the effect of challenges is so that at some point there's a good argument to make why they can just say these challenges will continue to exist based on the reporting of the challenge team, and will adjust the budgets based on that reporting. I kind of expect that that is the kind of system they want to move to, and maybe have new challenges entered through the challenge setting, but to make it a dynamic system of existing challenges with a challenge team, and their reporting is going to affect the budgeting for next rounds, which would take a lot of that voting complexity away from the challenge setting part. And I agree that that has to be solved, but I do worry about oversimplifying the challenges we have for the proposer side, and judging those proposers as a voter or as a CA relative to each other within such a large challenge.
I'd agree with that. So the follow-on from that is that this really is just focused on the funding categorization side, an approach, and you don't have to apply that to the system level. So when you're actually using interface and stuff, at the moment in idea scale, it would not be ideal. But the way that you solve that from a voter standpoint for viewing it is you need to make sure there's tags, and they're tagged on proposals. So you have gaming, DeFi, whatever the tags are for the different brackets in products and integrations, they should have their tags. So then when that goes into the voting app, you should be able to see those in the sub buckets you want to see. So if you want to see the gaming proposals, you can see all the gaming proposals, you can see all the DeFi. So then you have that ease of being able to see it, and this is a view layer. This has nothing to do with this has all the benefits of preventing the complexity of saying, oh, we're going to have this much funding for gaming, this much funding for DeFi, this much money for this. Like the complexity there, and it's impossible to be right, really. So it's like, how do you know the innovation that's going to come in gaming, or the ideas that are going to come ahead of time? How do you get to say that, there's not 3 amazing ideas that are going to be like absolutely world changing? And it's like that's the thing that you've got to be confident on when you start to break down categories and say, this is just for these people. This is just for this thing. How we view that data and what data we add to those proposals is how you simplify the kind of a step above. So in the short term, I see your issue. I think the tagging thing is a short-term thing that we'd have to get through to make sure things are much more visible and easy to go through on that voting app. And that's the exact thing I'd be pushing as the #1 change to do for the voting app with IOG if this proves popular, the category is kind of simplification. Unless you had something immediate to say, Sophie, I'll give it to Felix.
I'm going to let Felix jump in.
Not so sure. Go for it.
No, I didn't have a.
Okay. Yeah, you have a nice one. You both already. So.
I super appreciate your feedback. So it's like you've actually thought about it, and I can tell you understand the issues. And then I've been thinking about it for a lot. So I'm just like, how does this problem get solved? And it's like, oh, it's fine, we can solve it. So there's like, even if it got implemented now, I can see the benefits, but I also see the short-term pains. And I'm just like, and I don't think I see all of them, but I can see quite a few of them, and they can be solved at a system level with tagging and some of the things I put in, like the directing funding and all that kind of thing. And yeah, like it's hard to also bank that even if it gets through, I can't bank on IOG delivering the stuff that needs to happen for it to become this, like, we've simplified this bit, but then any type of proposal can go through. Great. Because it's like they have their own kind of schedule and stuff. So yeah, it's never the perfect world with catalyst changes.
Well, I guess I will respond. And then I do agree that a lot can be achieved by improving visibility and filtering, but in the end, it is the same pool, right? And you are fighting for the same spot to get funded. So that, and it will, I think, yeah, I'm pretty confident that it will become a lot more difficult for new proposers and smaller proposers to find their spot in just a couple really broad 2 million, 3 million budget categories or challenges. And also, yeah, it just thinking because it all aligns together, and that's the difficult part, because maybe it's just like I have a certain vision of where I think things are going, but maybe they're not going there at all, right? So I see like challenges becoming really like smaller and more specialized with their own group of CAs that really know that domain and really do all the proposals in that challenge, so it becomes more consistent within that, comparable, and having a challenge team that is guiding that process. But that's maybe a vision that it doesn't align with where things are going.
But the thing is, I actually agree fully with that kind of roadmap. It's just I don't think the funding categorization needs to be attached to these kind of groups of communities who start to focus on this one thing. I think like we can integrate in so many things into like the voting app, saying like, the community thinks that this amount, this is their kind of opinion of where people think, there should be a bit more funding here or here or here. You can have like an opinion based kind of voting, which kind of really helps us. People can be like, I want to follow that because I agree with it, and then I'm going to add in proposals that fit into these budget kind of weightings kind of thing. So it's like it's never a mandate, because as soon as you add the mandate on the bottom layer, you're saying you restrict innovation, the potential for other innovation to pop up that's incredible, and that people wanted to vote in. But I still think these how you're seeing it still should be the way it kind of goes forward, that people can start to specialize. It's just the tools that they have and use to kind of showcase, interact, and do all those, everything that's to do with that community. Doesn't have to be like, and they don't have to justify and then get everyone to say like, we think we need 800,000, we need 1 million, because these ideas, I mean, sometimes the ideas might be here, sometimes they're saying the ideas will be here eventually, don't worry, the ideas will be here. Like just put the amount through and watch it come in. Like, so it's different. Some people will have things lined up, great, and some people it's like will be just saying, here's a problem, and so the complexity would still be there if it's attached to the category thing. Whereas if you just do it in the, and what because it is just subjective, it's just saying, I think that this thing is the most important area at the moment, and these are the reasons why, and then you publish that to the community, and there should be ways to make sure people are aware of that information. And then if people agree, they're going to vote for that anyway. They're going to they're going to say these are the things that should be voted for sure. But at least if they're wrong, and like there's 5 other areas that turn up and go, whoa, have you seen this? This is some crazy stuff that's going on here. Then people have the choice. But if you do it at the categorization level, you restrict the choice. You say, no, this is the only thing that can happen right now. Like, you don't allow the spontaneity of innovation, which is what innovation really is. It's a spontaneous event. It's like things just, people come up with an amazing idea, or they've been working on something, they pivot, and like you can't say ahead of time what's exactly going to turn up. So that's why I'm so scared of it turning out how it is on the categorization level, where it restricts it. It's like, and you just have to like dabble. Oh, I'm just going to make a proposal here to get a bit of funding here and there, and like I can't really push the what I can see as the vision, because here's what I think it needs to be done. I don't have to worry about like trying to mix it up and stuff.
Yeah, it's not an easy situation. Yeah, I think in general, just I do agree that something needs to happen to make the challenge setting, or the way that we create challenges, different than how we deal with proposals. Like I fully agree with the sort of yes and yes or no on an entire budget for a whole category of just like area of investigation. That's not really that doesn't really work. And I think like in something like conviction voting would fit really well, right? Where it's more like people are putting a certain amount in, and they're just changing the distribution a bit, right? And over every round you can vote the amount down, right? It doesn't mean it disappears, but you just say like, this should be increased or this should be decreased, right? And so they or they slowly decrease over time unless they get funded, or so something like that it's more gradual, and maybe also a more standardized way for how a new challenge gets introduced. Like, these are the 2 budgets that you can start with, right? Maybe small one, medium one. Nobody can start with immediately 2 million out of nowhere, And if it's a good challenge, it can slowly over round increase in budget and build up to that kind of level. And that would be, I think, also more in line with like addressing the problems that you've identified.
Yeah, I think that's like a fantastic example of this kind of like layer 2 approach, where you just have like something else that can help to incentivize, and people are looking at that thinking, okay, these things are happening. It's just like bringing awareness, but on a more even serious level than just opinion, because like people are putting money behind it. There's also things about things like quadratic voting that Gitcoin do, and things like that. You could have some portion where people vote by giving ADA as well, and that could be like an add-on to the existing thing, or it could be a separate thing. There could also be like bonus structures. Let's say people kind of maybe a section of the like the treasury funding gets sectioned off for a separate thing. It could be like a booster thing, and it's just like everyone does an opinion vote on where this needs to go, and it's an infrastructure that does that, and then it's just like an extra $1 million or whatever. And then for every proposal type going through that process, if they are of the gaming type that's being selected, and the 1 or 2 or 3 seconds, then maybe they get like an uplift or a boost, or some sort of like, you're bringing in the kind of the spontaneity of the opinion subjectivity, and you're attaching it onto the egalitarian base. So whether it's extra funding, or it could be extra, I don't know if extra votes make sense. That could be a bit undemocratic, but there's so many things you could do, but you just stick to this egalitarian, really basic base. And that to me just feels like the right way to keep the base, pure, secure, like this simple for governance. This is kind of like, we're roughly saying these kind of the general areas. We slightly move the weights between them each time. People are going to say, oh, the developer ecosystem is doing really well. Like, there's so many tools now, and people suddenly realize that it starts to shrink a little bit. Community starts to get a bit bigger, but then all these tools on top of it just start to be used for, the net, whether, and rapid funding, I think, is another thing. It's like, that there's so many things we can do there. Whether it's like follow-on things, like you get funded a bit, or you had this amount of votes, you were close to getting funded. You could see the votes went for this happening, so we know people want it to happen. So then, like rapid funding related things to be like, we're filling a gap. Here's 20% of what you're requesting. Get going, and then reply again, and we're going to support you, because we can see the community wants you. Like, we're going to do everything we can to make sure you get through the next round. And that's just an example. There's obviously loads of things you could think about or do there potentially.
If I look at it like that, I do think that it's good to have sort of a really big difference in sort of having a couple really general, just core. It's kind of also the direction we wanted to go with the open source development ecosystem, right? It's pretty generic. It's like you can do all kinds of stuff. You can build like a second layer solution, or build some Catalyst tools, or host an event. And it's almost in that direction. And if you combine it with the developer ecosystem, it would sort of, and then you've split it more, I think, and that's a good split, like the Catalyst focus, Cardano focus, that people know, like, hey, people are building Catalyst tool or Cardano tools, right? So I agree with that it's good to have that gradual, like from big challenges, general stuff. And then if you want to make a specific challenge, then it should also be a lot smaller, right? And not just take up a whole chunk of the challenge setting. So I'm just curious how you're thinking right now, because you are proposing these challenges and sort of have the idea of trying to get some motion to get them through. And I'm kind of now also wondering, like, should I propose a new open source development ecosystem, or put support behind those two, right? Because they're kind of covering that base as well. And I'm kind of curious how you're thinking about, like, let's say that is the base, those categories that you're defined. How much room do you want to leave for other more specialized ones in this round, right? Is it about, is your idea like it should be everything, those categories, or like leave 40 to 20% to just like outside of this plan, just whatever more specialized, smaller ones?
Yeah, so on the making your own proposal, I think that's fully up to you. Like, I don't want to push anyone down the what issue on the challenge and things, because there's no process for me to kind of, and I'm still on this kind of path of trying to find reasons that it shouldn't replace almost the challenge setting thing. This kind of simple base, all the benefit, like the problem with having, if you have like, let's say, the 6 of them do half of the challenge, and then all the challenge setting stuff, the custom ones, is you then still have the same complexity. Like, you've done half of it, but you still have the same complexity of all the fund, the budget, the exact same problems exist, just on a different scale. So people still, to make any informed decision, still have to spend the time to look at, if they're smaller amounts, it's the same complexity. So I'm trying to find the reasons, not for them not to be the kind of total thing, but at the moment, I've not found good enough reasons why they shouldn't just replace it. The thing that as I mentioned before, that is biggest concern is all the directing funding approaches that I've listed out are just some, and there's going to be more. Are really quite effective at doing that. It's just they're not in place at the moment, and I am scared. I really don't want it to be like, there's Africa and Latin America, these proposals just don't get any funding. That's a fail. That's a fail. So maybe an interim category for that might solve that and just provide a safety net. And maybe that then could be the total kind of, it solves all the problems I've kind of heard, and just gives all those kind of benefits. But so yeah, I mean, welcome to propose obviously yourself, because I don't know how it's going to turn out. Like I talked to Chris, this, that, and the other, and tried to see what ways I can get it through Catalyst Circle. It's hard to say exactly what's going to happen. And then I forgot what your second question was. What was that again?
I think it was mostly about like by leaving some space, and you said like, yeah, if I see a good reason. Well, for me,
Yeah.
like the reason is that it is a huge change, and that you can never foresee all the consequences, and that should be enough reason to kind of keep some space for other stuff as well, to acknowledge like, hey, this is kind of like, we're doing this quick, we're trying to make this happen, but we're probably also just missing a lot of stuff, and maybe we're going to hurt the system a lot if we do this 100%. So leave some space to just have other things.
There's merit to that. The thing I would concern about is, let's say, for instance, you made the open source one, and there's some other identity one, another one. If those three got through, and then the six categories go through, suddenly I've just let the same thing happen again, where someone who has an identity proposal, hot Nelly, you get as much funding as you like, and if you're an open source thing, you've got as much funding as you like. There's quite a high probability of having the overweighting, unless people, and this is the whole risk of this as well. So even if I go full hog and say that this just solves many problems, it's split based on this budget weighting, feedback from the community, yada yada yada. If 3 of them get voted in and 3 of them don't, you could have the same situation where it's just like all developer ecosystem. And this is the risk with the moment. Like I want to do another process. I want to go through Catalyst Circle and do some very formal process, get some feedback, and make a decision and make a change. But the only way I have to make a change is through the challenge setting at the moment. I have no authority in Catalyst, to make big changes. I just have to push ideas out there and see what happens. So I'm worried. I'm worried about in either event that I do all, the budgeting for all of it, or the budgeting for a small amount. In either scenario, I'm worried about the weightings and where funding can go in the next round. If we don't start to like we've had it before, we've had it historically time and time again, and it will continuously happen. Unless just even with some collaboration you can help to solve it, but it's just like there's still always can be rough edges. So I don't know the right answer to make it a flawless thing without making a big change. Like there will be problems either way, unfortunately.
Well, I'll put it like this: I'll be more willing to sort of say like, okay, that covers what I want to cover with open source, but I would be more comfortable to put my weight behind it if it didn't try to replace everything at once. I feel uncomfortable because it's claiming, like, even if I think this is the right solution, I don't know, right? We cannot know. We have to accept that. So I think, and I agree that yeah, it can get messy, but like you said, it can also get messy if you go for the 100%. It can still become a complete mess, right? You get 2 of them in, and those are the same, doing the same as other challenges that do get in, and you still end up with a very focused situation.
Damned if I do, damned if I don't.
But yeah, I'll wait. We have some time, I don't have to make a decision now, but yeah, also in line of collaboration, right? Because I don't want to like, yeah, I think it's better if we try and try and collaborate as much as challenge setting proposers, exactly for this reason, right? To align a bit, to not just all throw in our ideas and not pay attention to each other, and to try and align our budgets as well a bit. I think it's kind of a responsibility that we have to at least try and not turn it into a huge mess next round.
Yeah, that is the remedy that I'm gonna have to apply to this. Is I'm just gonna have to be like reach out to anything that can. I mean, they all conflict in a way because the idea is of the categories is they fit in everything, but like it's the thing. Yeah. Like the idea for how I was going to approach whether it's try to replace all of it or half of it is to do some. I've already started a feedback process for the categorization itself with a form. I need to send it more over Discord and stuff. I shared it yesterday on Twitter and a few places, but I'm going to let that go for a little while. And then the second round of kind of feedback would be to, and maybe even trying to get into a town hall, is to look at, what should it, the question is, should it just go for the whole fund and just, we're happy with it? Or are we saying, we're going to do 50, 60, 70% or some sort of percentage wise? And, that I think is just get as much feedback as I can. And then see what the community consensus is on that. Because, at the end of the day, there's no point in me, even if I knew it was the right thing to do, if the community is not going to back it, doesn't make a fucking difference. It's like, there's no reason to be right when no one's agreeing with you, even if they didn't have the same thought process. So it's like it's going to be a community thing at the end of the day.
Yeah, I'm gonna let Thorsten jump in there because been going at it.
Sorry, I didn't follow the whole conversation, so I might kind of ask a dumb question or make a dumb comment. The thing which concerns me a little bit is that we are throwing a number of balls in the air at the moment. So kind of there is this DRAP discussion going on, which kind of is on the horizon. We have this discussion. And if we break something, let's assume that we break something, it will be very, very hard to find out what actually caused it. Yeah, so I think not trying it will not help the objective in itself, because failure in itself also has a learning element in it. So you know what not to do in the future anymore. It's just like if something goes wrong, you have to be able to kind of come back to the root cause for that. And if we're getting to a point where it is not clear anymore what actually was causing the failure in itself, then we kind of probably screwed up big time. Yeah. So, and the other thing is, sometimes if you don't know what's going to happen, there is probably kind of a good idea to kind of say, what is the safety net in the sense of, do we go for all in, or is it possible to kind of run a hybrid and kind of see whether that has some merit? That kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
So that's my. So I'm not opposing what you're proposing as such. I think it's a good idea in itself. It's just like, how can we at the end of the day get the learning out of it, whether it was really a good idea or not? I'm not saying it's not, but like, how do we get the proof of the pudding at the end of the day?
Yeah. It is it's a big enough change that there should be plenty of concern, and this is partly why I've dropped everything to I have proposals I've been funded for, and so this I think there's more merit and more impact to get this right, to get the feedback. Like to fuck this up is really could be really bad.
Okay, you fucked it up for one round and we can revert back, but the point in itself is, it would be a shame if we miss an opportunity because we're just not being able to trace it back to what actually caused what has happened or what is happening. Because this systems in itself, there is a theory around things, and then there's a reality around things, and somehow the reality kisses then the theory, and it is not the expected outcome of things. And that in itself is I mean, probably good or bad example. I kind of look at Sunday Swap and kind of the impact that had on the stake pool operators in itself. By a sudden, we had a totally negative impact, and now we had to reverse it. But out of this whole screw up, there was actually progress. So people try to solve problems which they would never have thought about if it wouldn't have happened. So there is the positive and the negative in itself. And I think we should be brave enough to make the errors early, So now is the right time. Yeah, if it's working, brilliant. We learned something. If it doesn't work, brilliant. We learned it early enough before it's more. There's really, really, really big money on the table. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not minimizing kind of the funds as such, but what if the fund is 10 or 20 times as big as it is right now?
Yeah, exactly.
And what is the temptation for a player at that moment in time to kind of play the system rather than now? I'm not saying now it wouldn't happen, but the impact in itself would be smaller. So fail early.
Love it. Yeah, it's one of those things where like we shouldn't be scared to change things, but it's also just like you need to change to kind of learn, and then it's kind of like trying to just forward kind of like ask what, trying to look at as much as you can what could go wrong doing this, and it's just going to work. It is one of those things. Fully agreed. And yeah, I'm still not on a decided fence on whether it should go half now. There's merit to that. There's also merit to the issues that could happen, and there's merit to taking it all on and doing a proper test, which is like just doing the whole hog. There's like merit to both, and it's like a I think it's just going to be a community consensus decision thing. Like I don't want to be the one person who pushes that, because it's kind of like, if anything goes wrong, what's going to happen? Like if anything, I want to diversify that the kind of responsibility of it. It's like, I've done the work on why it makes sense, and it's like, what do you guys think? I do everything I can just to, I'm just trying to help, and it's just like, here's the reasons why, and then let's just put it to a vote and see what people think. So I don't want to go into it saying the full weighting, the budget weighting between them. Also, another thing I'm thinking about is, one thing people are going to be worried about is having overly large proposals. Well, it's similar to the challenge sayings people have done, capped amounts, capped percentages, and we could apply the same thing within each of the challenges. So then, if you're a big proposer, you're a Maladex or Sunday Swap or something like that, and you want to make a big proposal, then if you want to do that, you need to break it up and actually be a bit more granular and be like, no, we're going to do this thing and this thing. So then it's at least broken down. So there's a minimum amount of proposals that will get funded. That's one thing that could help prevent someone taking half a fund, which is also obviously also not an obvious. You could say that you've got more chance of being right if you split up more, but sometimes there could be just leaders that are just fantastic at what they do, and then having a bit of funding via this. But then there's also the conversation between, should Catalyst be for lots of smaller players and nothing to be about bigger players or not? That's not a black and white decision. Why it should be one or the other. It's more of just a choice of what it's used for. So there's a lot of discussion on those things, and lots of ways that would impact these categories as well. And again, I think this is we're going to have some conversations over the coming weeks, and stuff I'm just going to be pushing through. Hopefully, IOG will help with these kind of votes. Maybe at the end of town hall, we just do like a vote for a few things, and it's just going to pass out the information and do it that way, maybe. So. Lots of hands. I will shut up. Thorsten, you went first again. So
I was first. Sorry, guys. It's your time in a minute. Turn in a minute. Two comments from my side on that one, and they're driven actually out of my professional background. Number one is, when you have to do something bold where you don't know how it ends, it's always a good idea to try to model the risk and have an good as possible understanding of risk and do a proper risk assessment, and more or less kind of say what kind of controls do we have to put in place to minimize the risk, because that in itself is taking a lot of uncertainty also off the table. It's better to know what the risk is and then take a decision, and there are methods and methodologies and whatever which can be used. So if you need some help on that one, please reach out. I think I know at least 1, 2, 3 people which at least have their fingers in there, so that would help. And the second one is actually, and that's kind of hovering all the time already, is if you can grab money but you're not getting held accountable for it, it is causing a high temptation. The more, and I'm not saying kind of change the whole model in itself and give it now in an extreme other direction, but it's kind of the element which also would prevent. So perhaps we have to also start thinking in that direction, like if the funds in itself could potentially get bigger, which someone can grab, how do we assure that return on intent in itself is given? And is the model like, I pay you 5 times and then we are kind of going separate ways? Is it with this amounts on the table still valid? So kind of like, perhaps we have to bake more into it than just kind of categories. Perhaps it has to have this additional controls, which don't make it impossible, but on the other side, make it reasonable, accountable. Yeah. And the last comment from my side is, I heard a lot of people went through a number of funding rounds who say reporting really sucks, and if you more or less split it down, the reporting effort is still the same. And I can understand that it might be easier to get a big lump sum, but the question then is kind of like, if you buy a house, the bank kind of goes through hoops and has assurances left, right, and center. If you effectively buy a TV, that's kind of a different kind of story. So what I'm trying to say is, it depends also a little bit on the amount of money which is on the table, how much control you have to get, have to be willing to get imposed on yourself. And my expectation would be also, if someone gives me 500,000, I want to make sure that the person delivers worth 500,000. If the money on the table is 500, then I'm more willing to say, okay, it's more or less experimental, and if it fails, it's not going to more or less drill a hole in the bottom of the ship. Yeah, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
Like taking 500,000 or 1,000,000 away from the community is quite a significant amount of money, and it takes quite a bit of opportunity also off the table for other people who didn't get funded.
Yeah. On auditability, I think it's something that applies across, regardless of what you're challenging. It's one of those things that is just like really important, and it applies slightly differently when you have larger proposals. Obviously, you have more allocation of funding you can allocate for a large proposal because it's worth more, so it's worth spending more time on the auditing side. But in either scenario, whether it's small or large, our auditability side and reporting is pants. And it's just like I've been going through the reporting process myself. I've had a few, number of funded proposals that I have to report for, and there's a number of reasons why some of them are blocked, this, that, or the other. So like my reporting is very, just kind of like, there's not much I can say on this one. It's just kind of, I'm doing it consistently, but the quality and the, like what it means is very little. There's no way, there's no like system that goes, this is the problems I'm having, and someone else can see it and be like, oh, I could help you there. But there's so much to do on that one. But somewhat separate from the thing with cash creation, it does important is the bigger proposals and thinking like how there is some simplifications if you had 5 big proposals, because it's much easier to go through those 5 big proposals and work out which ones are crap when if you've got loads of 50,000 ones. So you've got obviously conflicting kind of issues there, but super valid points. I guess it's the area that I want to work on after categories and stuff and trying to push some changes on here. I've been funded for reporting tools, so I'm literally working on this next.
Hook me up. Yeah, hook me up. That's all I can say.
We should chat. I mean, to be fair, I've got funding sitting around for the reporting stuff, and if you have any time to go into it, let's chat. I've already been looking at some of the issues I have with the identity tools at the moment.
I popped my Telegram handle in the chat, and then you can ping me.
Yeah, that sounds sweet. Much obliged. Sophie, sorry to keep you waiting.
All right, yeah, I'll try and keep it short because I've already taken up a lot of session time. But it does relate also to what Thorsten has been talking about and other things that we're kind of trying to, or other people have been talking about as well, based on experience also from groups that work with sociocracy and holacracy and kind of those kind of ways of working, about consensus and how you proceed with this, right? And also about mitigating risk. And because I think those two relate as well, and splitting problems and solutions. So this was a bit chaotic, but I'll tie it together. So you've identified problems, right? And on that, I think even within this group, you can reach consensus, but consensus is really difficult because consensus is what we actually agree on. And that's often very little, right? And the bigger the group, the smaller the amount of stuff we actually really agree on. But then there's also the stuff that we can tolerate, right? And there's a lot more stuff that I can tolerate than that I actually agree on. right? And then there's stuff I don't even tolerate, right? And that's the really tricky stuff. And so if you move from trying to find consensus in the group to consent, then it's more about what can people tolerate, right? So if you're not looking for consensus, but you're looking for consent, the question doesn't go with, do you agree, but do you have any objections? And if people do have real objections, then look to find ways to mitigate or those objections, or to put like a safety guard in place, or to minimize the experiment. And that's kind of in holacracies, often you're constantly changing the system, you're introducing new changes. And it's always the question to turn it around is like, does anybody know a good reason why we shouldn't do this? Or does anybody know a good way how we can do the same thing but do it smaller? And this is kind of, I think, also what Thorsten was referring to, that you see a problem, you want to try out a solution, but there could be many solutions, right? And everybody will have a different solution. I agree with the problem, but I would go for a different solution. But you're doing the solution, that's good, right? So we need to do that, or give you space to do the solution. Because people who are not doing that's not changing anything. But then like finding a way to give the people who have solutions the space to do that without it affecting too much, to find the minimum, what's the minimum way to try this out. So to think of it in that direction, and to look for people who have objections, to find ways to sort of look for that minimum viable experiment, I guess is something you could call it.
Yeah.
And then you
Yeah,
have
I fully agree.
consent on the solution and consensus on the problem, sort of.
Yeah, I wish, like, this is the thing, that's the dilemma in Catalyst, is like getting consensus on anything, because we have no process. And like we have Google Forms, which is what we use for the Catalyst Circle stuff, and that's what I'm going to be using it. And it's like, yeah, it's not full consensus at all. It's just trying. It's an attempt.
I think we should stop trying to reach it, and we should focus on how we can build around consent. Making sure that nobody has any major objections when we try something. Like, for example, within the circle, does any member have a real objection? No? Okay, then we can try this out. Yes? Okay, how can we change it so the objection is covered?
Yeah.
And often it's like inviting the person who has an objection to do observation of the change, right? Like often that is already enough. Like, yeah, but what if we make a group that's gonna like give a report on how it went, and what if you are part of it, right? Then you can turn the critics into like really powerful tools.
Yeah. Yeah, great thoughts as usual. Yeah, I continuous conversation with Catalyst Circle as well. It's like I'm just trying to involve any party on it. I think it's just like get as many faces on it. But I've already had some great feedback from yourself and others on certain problems. I think it's starting to get to that point, getting closer towards consent. Definitely not consensus. I'll never reach consensus, but I don't piss off everyone, that I'm at least moving in the right direction. Felix.
Yeah, one thing for the funding categories, it comes a little bit to what Thorsten mentioned already. Say, okay, to define already let's say a safe environment where you can experiment with the idea. And also to say, okay, because the category the funding categories already try to solve specific problems, right? But specific problems to which specific, let's say, target group in this case, for example. It would mostly help people, okay, to have an easier overwatch and to bring more structure, to make it much more logic, much more on the point and everything. The thing is that with the funding categories, when you would replace, let's say, for example, whole catalyst to this, you would somehow kill the process what we actually have right now with the challenges. Because the challenge proposals we have right now, it's not really product, right? It's not really something finished, it's a process which repeats itself all the time. The categories, they won't be a process anymore, because once they are defined, then it's just about adjusting them or improving them. But you wouldn't have the community anymore acting as a sensor to identify problems by challenges. So to say, how can we maybe keep this? Because this is a very important topic. Also, when you have the possibility to identify problems by yourself, map them as a challenge, and then submit proposals in this challenge, that's a beautiful process for especially when it comes to collaboration to build teams, right? Because they have their very specific use case for a short time slot. It's not forever, and people know it. And that's even some beauty in it, because you know it's not forever. You appreciate the opportunity sometimes even more, right? When you have the categories, you have a very static experience, which you definitely need, let's say, as an established project to count on your future, because now what you have as advantage for a really young project, let's say, for example, for a certain time period, through the funding categories, one thing, what is very difficult, for example, right now in the challenges change each 3 months. We don't know what comes later. As a project, we have to build a sustainable, let's say, certain time frame. You can't rely on 3 months time frames where you don't even know which challenges you can play, which proposals for, right? So, but it's pretty beautiful, because this situation forces projects to act extremely flexible and dynamic. They will never build a static structure. They are not even able, because they wouldn't even survive a catalyst. So to say what we have here and what we explore with the challenge settings, it's a beautiful mechanism which should be kept, definitely, I think, because it definitely merits to stay. But for a later stage, when you are already well-established project and you went successfully through 3 funding rounds, there to cut the challenge settings doesn't make any sense anymore. And there your categories would fit really like on the spot. So maybe to define as well, okay, how could, in which safe environment and in which really specific use case could the funding categories sit where they really have the biggest impact as well, without taking off what the current system really has as a huge advantage. Don't know if it makes sense.
It makes absolutely perfect sense, and I think it's something that needs to be explored more on. And this is what I kind of referred to on the directing funding thing of these kind of community kind of priority reports. Is the idea is they're exactly the same as the challenge setting, and I think like if we did move the categories for whatever reason, we wouldn't necessarily need to remove the challenge setting kind of process in whether you call it challenge setting. You could go like challenge ideas or something like that, or some different name. You could still go for that kind of same process, saying this is what this kind of, it's like a report. You're saying here's the reason why this is an important area of the ecosystem. So you could still have this kind of that area, but that doesn't capture all of it. That's still really valuable, because people kind of do that analysis. They look at the thing, they say this is a really important area. So you solve one, that you could solve one of those problems. But the thing that I agree on is the this, when you have this kind of like random challenge come up, and then it's very focused on something that you care about, then it kind of gives you that kind of bang, like you need to step up and do something now, and it's kind of like it happens very spontaneously. And I think there's some beauty, it's a massive beauty to that. And how you, there's obviously ways we could replicate that with this kind of rapid funding, all these different kind of things. And I think this is going with what you show. You need this kind of mix between complete spontaneousness, but then you also need some sort of rigidity, where it's kind of like, this is just completely fair, completely easy. You know what to expect. Like, here's a process, boom, like anyone can do it. And then some things where they're much more just like dynamic, and it's like, we've seen this problem, we need to get funding to it. Like, it's like this is not going to be here forever. So whether it means it has to be attached to side by side with this, or it's like it's a rapid funding thing, or it's a completely separate process. Maybe it's just like an ever-changing kind of process that's completely separate from Catalyst. Maybe this is a separate treasury kind of funding thing. The issue with that, though, which I go over in I think the Catalyst contributors documentation, is when you've got competition between two types of funding kind of thing, and they're competing for resources, that can obviously cause some friction. It's good and bad. It's just obviously it's nuanced. But yeah, like I think the spontaneous thing is something that I don't know if I document well in the analysis, but it's something that is worth me making a note of, because I want to chat about that in some ways. It needs to have like, here's a problem and here's some beauty to it, and then here's like ways it can still be incorporated. Here's some future solutions. Here's some thoughts around that whole, the importance of it, because it is super important. It's just like, it's a nice like, this is sudden problem, sudden spark, sudden whatever it is, whatever's like that thing, people can react to it, and it's just like a call to arms. Like it's like come solve this. Like hackathons, it's gonna like, it'll be like that, but it's a bit more advanced.
By the way, George, really huge shout out for firework in the categories. I mean, impressive work, man.
Yeah, thank you for always giving me feedback, mate. I mean, yeah, I've shared so many links with you over the last few weeks. So sorry for bombarding you, but you are.
No. I love to read through and to look on and say, what the fuck, the guy was really deep. That's impressive to see how much responsibility you take in your thoughts as well. So, yeah, okay. So thanks a lot.
Everyone, everyone loves the 20-page Git book. Everyone. I can't wait to read this. Lucky me. You picked me. Yeah. Oh, massive thank you. Jonathan, hit me.
My first response to seeing the categories was like, oh, finally some clarity and some calm structure around the chaos that is challenge setting. But I do acknowledge the problems that we will face, no doubt, by introducing strict categories. I think a gentle approach is definitely needed. So whether we're approaching it from a half and half, trying both at the same time, or whether we're actually looking at it from a different angle, in that, okay, categories are a structure solution, and challenge setting is an innovation creation tool, and we want to maintain and keep both of those in an ideal system, I think. So it's almost, and also we've got sort of two opposing forces that have got issues with the current system. We've got proposers who lose momentum because the challenges switch fund to fund, and you've got voters who are completely bamboozled by the amount of choice when it comes to voting. To throw in the mix, like Thorsten was saying about D-reps, and suddenly we've got another new factor in this whole mix that we don't know what we've broken where. So I think that D-reps solve a problem in terms of simplifying the voters issue, in that you can find someone you trust around a certain narrow topic that will hopefully solve some of your voting issues. And then you just leave it to the D-reps to navigate that challenge setting minefield. But in terms of the proposers, I think it's almost like you want to have your challenge setting fitting within the categories. So you're creating your challenge settings, and you're pitching your challenges in amongst those large top tier categories, so that you know that you've got the broad base covered. Then that leaves you with the option of having your voting UI almost, having all the project, all proposals within each challenge, also conforming to a category structure. Then if you've got tagging thrown in as well, you can also remove the challenge setting terminology from the voting app, and you've just got that clear category structure and the individual proposals that fit within that category structure. And you've also got tags that you can use to change how you're navigating through the whole ecosystem. And the real problem with all this is, how do we get something that works at scale? Because it's getting more and more and more unmanageable at a the same size as the funds. What's the word? It's cumbersome. It's more and more cumbersome each time. So it's going to be impossible. It is already, in my opinion, for one person to actually know and navigate the whole structure. So having a category suddenly makes it far more consumable, in that you can go to the portion of it that actually you do have some expertise. You can convey a decent vote in, and that helps. But yeah, it will also raise a whole load of problems with dampening innovation, which I do strongly agree with Sophie's point on that as well. So I think actually, if we can have the challenge setting existing, coexisting, continuing specifically around the proposing portion of things, But we've also got that overriding category structure to place your challenges within and your proposals then within. That sort of gives us a halfway house. And it then almost becomes a UI challenge where you're just saying, okay, I'm coming in as a proposer. What challenges can I go for? Or what challenge setting is there that I can go for? Or what category can I go for? And you've got some sort of hand holding then fund to fund. Or you've got the voter protect. Another thing that I think would be really useful is to actually, if we're maintaining challenge settings, is to make them less of a, a disruption every 3 months, is to bring in some damping so that actually a challenge setting, once it is voted in, has then 2 or maybe 3 funds that it has to recur in. And maybe the fund allocation within those challenge settings diminishes over time if the votes aren't, if it's not seen as a successful voting category for some metric that I haven't come up with yet. But you've got this sort of damping effect across the funds, so that there is some consistency and continuity within the challenge setting as well as within the categories. Yeah, I think that gets all my thoughts down. One more thing that came up as well was coming up Fund 8, we've got Cardano scaling, and we've got Orbis proposing in that project, and they're asking for the full $1 million budget.
As recommended by my challenge setting.
Okay.
So if you want to take the whole proposal, you should, because like zero knowledge proof people are just like a dime a dozen. Like if you can find one that they're willing to work, so just take the money. Like we need you. Come in, please. But yeah, go on.
But so I want that project in, I want that voted in, but then suddenly we've got 1/16 of our whole budget funds knocked out, and all the project proposals that would have fit within that scaling solution, they don't have anywhere to go.
I think that's a good example of where sometimes it's good to have these big proposals where the talent is to a high enough caliber where it's good, like this, the 100,000 doesn't move the needle for them. They're either going to go for like some sort of C fund, the other things that are going on, and for them to even look at this, it needs to be at least around that $500,000 kind of million thing. And I don't think it's clear yet whether Catalyst should or should not be for those kind of like slightly bigger things. It's like, but I don't think competition in the short term is bad. We have lots of proposals of varying quality. Having a bit of competition is not a bad thing in the short term. I think it's something to it's going to be an experiment. So some like Sophie, everyone's been bringing awareness. There is potentials, and there's, without thinking about the directing funding approaches and how we can actually solve those issues, there are risks. There are people that could get left out, and that's a concern. But competition could also bring in certain people that make a massive impact. At the end of the day, we want to have great solutions that people can adopt, that actually make worldwide adoption. If the result of having 3 big guys who have lots of funding that do that, it's hard to say that definitely won't happen. So it's kind of like giving the choice of the multiple outcomes is not necessarily a bad thing. But it's risk. I'm not here saying that it's definitely the right solution. I'm thinking it solves many problems, but there's risks that we think about. I think Orbis taking that whole thing is not a bad thing at all. I'm excited to see it looks moderately likely based on what I've seen. I've not read into it in any depth yet, but it looks fairly good. On the point you said earlier about the challenge setting, I don't like the idea of challenge settings going in with categories to then have the same voting stuff, because then you've kind of got the same problem of complexity, budget weighting, the exact problem I'm trying to solve with categories, where you're just saying, this is just for you. Like, you can only have this, like, if there's great innovation elsewhere, sorry, we've decided that so like attaching, as soon as you attach the budget again at a sub level, you have the exact same kind of problems of this justification of why it exists, what's the budget, what's the data, and all the reasons why it should definitely have that budget. So like, I'm a bit worried on that, but I do love the idea of, let's say, you obviously have the tagging idea, but you have this kind of challenge setting, and that's kind of like this very kind of custom kind of curated list where it's like, we think this is really important, and here's the proposals that match this challenge, and they all go into that bucket. So then the person who thinks it's important can then present why it's important and all the proposals that address it. And this is an exact perfect reason scenario of this kind of directing funding thing, where you're just like, someone's provided some great reporting and analysis of why this stuff's important, which is what one of the nice things of what the challenge setting thing does at the moment. And they still make that grouping of things, but that one person's or 2 people or even a small team isn't trying to make a dictation on like, no, this is how much funding must be available for these people because of XYZ. It's optional. It's completely optional to the community. They can go, I agree with everything you're still doing here, and there's some great proposals that have turned up. I'm going to vote for all of them. Your analysis is right. The proposals are right, but they get to decide at the voting stage. They don't have to go, oh, like, like, oh, like at the beginning, be like, yes, and just hope for the best. That's the thing I have the issue with. It's like just hoping for the best and be like, let's just section off this stuff and just hope for the best. Whereas if you leave it to the later in the stage, you have all the optionality, and that's the beauty of it. It's like if you can maximize options in the egalitarian kind of side, you have all the options on the table. If people want to vote that way, they can do, and they can change their mind in a minute. If something changes, boom, like they can be like, yeah, no, actually, this, that team member's changed or this or that. Suddenly, I don't want to vote for that. Like you want to always allow for that method elasticness. Like there's a lot of benefit to that, I think. So yeah, I'd be scared of ever reducing it, but I think you just got a really good. It kind of increased my thoughts on the curated listing. The curated list should really be part of this kind of priority report, where it's kind of really part of that report. The report should be the first part, and then they should add the proposals that meet the report subsequently. So yeah, thank you for that. That's
yeah, and I quite like the idea of having the vote yes no vote almost on the challenge setting, but then once they're in, then maybe there's consensus reached over the budget, like Sophie was saying. So actually the size of the budget is variable up until the point of category setting, challenge setting, and finalization. So it's like we're reaching consensus on, okay, we've recognized these challenges are great. Now we've got some kind of partial vote on what budget allocation there is, and that could perhaps be maybe set in stone at the category level, but then flexible at the challenge setting level if you went in this multi-tiered thing. But yeah.
That's a great example of where it would make more sense to be more opinionated on when to allocate kind of funding potentially beforehand. When you've got very good, evidence and proposals in front of you, it's like we're voting on, we're not just saying here's what we should be doing. We've got all the solution paths, and that you have your confidence level is much higher. Then you're literally going into it like, we're asking for the exact amount. Here's what they're doing, and here's all the stuff. So I think what you're saying there is potentially it's definitely better than what we've got at the moment. We're just going, yeah, I think DeFi needs $1 million. I think this needs that. Like, I mean, based on fuck all, but this needs that. This needs that. If you do it with that approach, at least you've got much more data. And that's the thing that would excite me, is like we're going into things with more confidence when we're saying, it's not just guesswork. It doesn't add so much complexity at this base. We're going in with confidence. So yeah, I think that's great. It's definitely better than what it is now.
And it could almost solve the problem of having like 1 million Orbis project in there. We've got some other really great scaling solutions that we want to fit in as well, but that budget's all gone. But actually, no, we could stretch that a bit. Let's give them some space.
And this, like, you could have like a rolling thing. I mean, it's thing like we've got this 3-month thing, but people should be able to add in proposals at any time if people just start to understand it. You need the max amount of time to really kind of go through and look at these things. For the people, because most people are strapped for time. People are going to be looking at scaling solutions who really understand that. They've probably not got a lot of time. So if it's just a rolling thing where the proposals are there, and we're just trying to say when they're ready, they're going to, maybe they get allocated stuff, or there's a few ways to do that. I think the categories I've got at the moment is not the end solution, and I think something like what you're suggesting there is a good alternative, where it actually you come in with data, you come in with evidence, you come in with proposals, and people have looked at it. It's like for plenty of time, and it's like we're not doing any guesswork here. Here's the report, here's this, here's that, boom. Like let's here's the reasons to do it. So I love it. I think this could be, we should have a chat, just you and me. We'll solve this in a few months. Maybe there's something to go down this route afterwards. The only reason I really like categories at the moment is it's quite easy to implement. Like it's literally a case of just we can use ideate scale, we can use this, and then this is how I'm approaching Catalyst in general. Like I've tried working with the APIs and do all these different things in Catalyst. Very hard to make change in the short term. You've got to really think of the small things that can actually change and like you push through, and then the cascading effect that will have. Things like Catalyst contributors, I think, could have a fucking massive change. But as soon as that can come through, then you can start to organize like a group that's paid, and boom, 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 they become more like credible and take over the responsibility from IG. Like it's slow and steady. And then what you just suggested there is that perfect, like we've done the first thing, and here's like another thing we could do. And so, beautiful. Wow. Love you, Jonathan. Love you. Wow. It's awesome.
I wonder whether I should give Felix kind of the hand upfront because he had it up and then he put it down again. Felix, do you still want to say something?
No, go for it.
Are you sure?
He's lurking.
I'm
He's
not.
waiting to
I'm
strike.
not offering. I'm not offering twice.
He's trying to shut me down. I know it.
Yeah, I'm fine. Go for it, Thorsten.
I have a number of thoughts around this. I mean, one of these thoughts is, and it comes pretty much out of the corporate world, and I don't know yet how that can be translated properly, but it's kind of like if you think in general structures, you have kind of what is called a management layer. I would say that is kind of a governance layer, which is determined strategically the direction in which kind of things have to go. Then you have effectively the value chain, which is kind of different elements which you need to get from an idea to effectively the person or the group, company, whatever is using it. And then you have a support layer in itself. And what strikes me at the moment is there are obviously different objectives, specifically in the value creation layer and in the support layer. So when I, for example, look at Felix with Swarm, that is not something which more or less should be challenged in the same manner as an innovative idea, because that's just fundamentally wrong. That's kind of like the support layer, which we as a community need. I'm not saying that we cannot get to the point where we say we don't need that in this form anymore. Everything should be actually challenged, but it is not right that kind of like these elements which are provided to the community have to kind of go through this process of getting approved for funding again and again and again and again. I mean, this is taking too much a burden from my perspective, and it's not really adding the right amount of value for the process which that go through. And then for this middle layer where we create value, which is the engine to drive growth actually for Cardano, there are actually two things from my perspective. There is this experimental thing where you would want to have as much freedom as possible, but manage the risk in an appropriate way. And then on the other side, you have things which are creating value already. Yeah. So which kind of have a proven record of this is in the corporate world, the first one is innovate and the second one is exploit. It's a bad term, but you know what I mean, kind of. This is something where you have to keep the petrol in the tank to keep it running, to maximize actually the value which it can create. And again, this is the other element where we are kind of mixing things up, because some of these projects now kind of mature and more or less kind of need this continuous funding kind of to maximize the value creation, because they are providing value already. Whereas there are others which are actually kind of like, I have an idea here and I don't know yet whether it works or not, but I need some money to kind of prove it, either that it works or it doesn't work. Yeah. And we are running all of that with the same mechanism, which is causing a lot of pain in itself, because it's fundamentally different if someone says, I have a cool idea. I don't even know whether that will ever create any value. I believe it will, because otherwise I wouldn't submit the proposal. But all I can do is I have the intent to prove that. And then there is someone else who actually has a running environment and who needs effectively a continuous funding. And I mean, the point at that moment in time is at which moment should that this detach from Catalyst, or has to find a different way of funding, which is not competing with this innovation fund, if you understand what I'm saying. So we probably have to start thinking about it also from that perspective, because we're not in the stage anymore where we have been a year ago, where pretty much everything was, we have to try this out, and more or less the more the better. Now that part has to stay, but now we also need this supporting structures. We need this governance layer kind of maturing, and we need effectively to make sure that stuff which is adding value to the ecosystem in itself doesn't stop because it runs out of money, because that would damaging for the whole ecosystem. Do I make myself clear how I'm thinking? So, and
Absolutely
we
nail on
have
the
to
head, yeah.
and we have to kind of try to get smarter around the allocation of funds, because that's a scary source. Yeah, if you would have money like there is no tomorrow, then all of that would get funded and we could see what happens. But if you have a scary source, we have to find an intelligent way to minimize the spend for the support, but get the most out of it. We have to mature our governance layer. I think we are not good in that. The decision making by the community is based on too little informed decision making. It's more like, I think it's a good idea. Well, yeah, that's kind of like for this one group. Yeah, good ideas. Yeah, shoot for the moon, but then also kind of make sure that certain things are getting done. So pain point currently is how do we scale effectively Cardano? But yeah, if you can get it for 1 million, give them 1.5. Yeah, because yeah, if you know what I mean, like if they need 2 and they can deliver on it, and it returns at the end of the day the value which more or less unlocks us from a problem which we are facing as a from a technical perspective, great. And that way we have to kind of allocate funds more where they create effectively impact. Yeah, rather than kind of like do all with the same mechanism.
You're on multiple factors there. Your thought process is bloody spot on. I think this is why I'm not very opinionated on trying to kind of say that it needs to be small, or it's why I like the competition side, because I'm scared for small proposals, but I like the whole range. Like I think there could be big proposals. It's hard to stay ahead of time what could happen. On the support thing, great situation. This is kind of part of the reason why I was thinking the catalyst contributors, and that paying the proposals is one way of doing things. Paying for people is going to be like another way for like existing things that we need just to run, like govern and just manage. People just need to be paid for that. Like we don't need to do a proposal to say, is this valuable? Is this innovation? It's like funding people is another way to do that. And then for new ideas, yeah, they could go through the proposal process, or it goes through rapid funding or something like that. So yeah, like massively. Yeah, your thought process is very clear, which I
thank you.
Mad respect. Sophie, I can't think of anything else that was on my head. And there was something else I was trying to respond to, but you said like 3 things. I only remember 2. They were all good things, though. I was just like, this is good. This is good. I agree with that.
Yeah, I also wanted to just jump in to agree with that. So I'll add to the just the whole, and that's another way of just like the categories in general, and that's sometimes a bit difficult because, well, you've done a lot of work, and so sometimes I have difficulty when I'm trying to address different parts, because it's a very complete package, but there are certain aspects that on itself already add a lot of value in the sense that if we go to more categorizing challenges, like having a broad understanding, and by that I mean, like, let's say everybody who is going to propose a challenge has a shared understanding of different formats of challenges that we could apply, like a role-based challenge, like the contributors that you did, right? And so we have we have role-based challenges, we have solution-based challenges, we have process-based challenges, we have foundational community, just there's different kinds of way of working that Thorsten was also referring to, like experimental challenges where people are, and then you also know how to, like, it would really change the mindset of people of how to approach things within it, right? If it's an experimental challenge for less money, then we don't need to be so strict about how we're going to do auditing and things like that. And to separate a bit that idea of like, hey, we can have different types of challenges. We can have role-based challenges like the contributors, because I think that idea, like in itself, is really, it's really important. If that, I totally agree. Like if that comes in, that would just make a huge change, right? And but it's really hard to get those kind of challenges in. It seems like there's been a couple attempts to do different process types. But just that in itself to focus on like how can we get support for different processes as well, and these kind of
I think it comes back
different
to
formats, and maybe that is also something to take into account, because if all these categories is something I was thinking about, is like how is the proposal form going to look for the contributors? Because if it looks the same that we get now, it's going to be really awkward, right? So to take that,
I had to write an assessment guide to kind of map what was going on existing me to make it work for that. I was like, here's a mapping that could work that means you don't have to worry about this too much. I've done something, it works, but it's not exactly how how you should really review the contributor per se. It's just like I'm trying to work within the realms of what's available in front of me, but I fully understand that it's not in any way perfect. It's like it's good enough, but
I'm having trouble as well expressing my thoughts here, but I wouldn't mind like spending some time together, like trying to flesh that part out separately, just like the different formats that we can to sort of take what you have and say like, okay, we can make these kind of different ways of making a challenge.
Yeah, I'd love to think about that. Yeah, because at the moment, it's proposals and people and just hiring people. Those are the two kind of main things. I think back to what Thorsten was saying earlier. It's actually the third thing I was going to mention. Is there's some things people are just throwing out ideas. They're not really proposals yet. They're just ideas. We were like I thought Thorsten just catching up with what I've been doing for the last year in an evening. But I got funded for an idea collaboration tool, and that's the other thing that I can be working on with this reporting tool. But the problem is, it's like I've got no authority to push it through. It needs to be like an official kind of thing, really, for it to be any value. But to have before the proposal stage, you have idea kind of at the moment we have this insight sharing kind of stage, but that needs to become much less ephemeral, where it just goes away into the doodally. Like it needs to be like, here's an idea, here's something I think is important, like could work, and then it's just there, and people can provide feedback to it, and it can morph into a proposal, or it could morph into something else. It could morph into just it could be a process thing. It could be like somewhere where people are going to share ideas, and it's grouped in a people relevant to what it is, scaling this, that, or the other. And it has no intent to get funding, although it could turn into something that gets funding. It's just like it's a collaboration kind of platform kind of thing. And I know some people have been talking about this, and I think a few different proposals and things. So whether my funding gets directed to someone else, I don't know, but that needs to be there, like something where it's just much more free flowing. It's not necessarily about getting the funding. It's just about that kind of teams forming, idea sharing, all that side. That's something else I think that kind of maps along. It's not necessarily to do with funding. Proposals and people are about funding. This is about kind of supporting those in a way, but it's just the earlier stage of just here's some ideas, here's some problems, here's some data, here's some data that could mean something. It could be anything. It could be like, I've seen all these metrics about this DeFi stuff. Is this a problem? What's going on here? There's having a really good channel for that would be, I think, probably massively powerful, because then this is the same thing with governance, and the same. I've had proposals for community credentials where the idea is going to be like participation and completion within certain groups. But as I've been thinking about Catalyst contributors and these Cardano contributors, the single thing that I think would be the most value, high impact credential right now is if those contributors could have some sort of credential and a really simple voting mechanism. So then they could actually be good custodians of some rapid funding mechanism. There's some support thing going on here. We can just agree, send some funds to that, and it's got a good base. It's a great cool idea. You could rapid fund 5,000 or this or that just to go and try that. This is support process we know is valuable. Someone's we've got these people who are doing it part-time. Here's some funding for that. Or we need to make a decision. We want to make this idea tool, and we're going to either delegate some work or do it part of it ourselves. Reach consensus. It's on. We've got it on chain. Boom, done. Here's all the signatures. Boom, done. Just having some really simple kind of decision thing would be massively beneficial to really. The first stages of it could just be through like a Discord vote where people like these are just kind of like delegated some responsibility. The circle seems to be getting somewhat close to that, but the contributors are perfect. They're literally incentivized and paid to work on Catalyst or Cardano. They should have some responsibility and accountability, but to actually make changes. So you don't want them to be able to do nothing. they need to be able to make changes. You want to choose people that you think are good representatives to make those changes. So just kind of throwing some Thorsten related level ideas out there, just trying to catch up with Thorsten with some ideas. So, bang, bang, you ain't got me. Bang.
Sorry.
Sorry, I'm chatting shit. Someone, Ken, I always trust on Ken. You came in late, Ken. Have you got anything for me? No
I don't
pressure.
know. I'm just trying to catch up, I guess.
We've been going
Yeah.
at it. We've been going at it. One idea I've had in my head that I'd be interested to get people's thoughts on is potentially, I've been thinking of the naming for Catalyst ecosystem and Cardano ecosystem. I think there's merit to those. Like I had that image that says what they're about. I've got the alternative that I think maybe development and node operation and governance and identity may be better names to be like very explicit on what they're about. And then when you describe them, you say this involves anything to do with Catalyst changes as well as open source governance tools, identity tools, all that kind of side. So when you just see the name, it's a very explicit on what it is. And then when you look into it, you know it includes Catalyst, and all that kind of sub thing. And on development, well, development generally is like for improving that ecosystem for how can you make it easier to develop on Cardano. I don't know people's thoughts on that. Well, I was going to do a poll on Twitter, but I care a lot about the names of the categories because they need to be like, as soon as you see it, I want you to understand what it's about. And I'm worried that Catalyst ecosystem and Cardano ecosystem don't achieve that. Catalyst contributors make sense, like people who are working Catalyst, like it's just very easy to grasp. Catalyst ecosystem, I'm not sure. Like,
Yeah, I think there's a risk that they're a bit similar. And then especially if you don't know about them. And I knew about the contributors, and this time I skipped over the fact that you split them up. And then I was responding to one, and then it's like later I realized, oh wait, actually I think I should have responded that to the Cardano one, I guess. Yeah, so maybe the other way you described it would be more explicit. Yeah, because the naming, yeah, you could think like, is there even a difference especially for new people where node operations and development is pretty clear what it's about.
Yeah, because like for instance, the idea is you have in the Catalyst one, the idea is both of those I think are much more like very kind of open source infrastructure related. So if you had an open source governance tool, then that would fit in the Catalyst ecosystem. On like if it's like a for-profit like network this or that, it should go in products and integrations. If it's just like an open source tool for other people to build on top of, that's a different thing. And I think that's where I think the descriptions I can improve a bit more than they are. But I think the Catalyst ecosystem Cardano are much more, it's like this is stuff to like make it easy to build on. Like, you're improving Catalyst or Cardano like just above it itself, or it's just kind of like open source tools and that help other people. Like that's the perfect thing. I don't want to say it's restricted to just open source. I want to see how it's going to be used. But that's kind of the intent, because then it's quite clear cut on, oh, this is about developing on Cardano, this is about all the governance and identity and all that kind of side. And it's quite easier when you're doing budget weighting to understand, oh, this thing, the governance and identity is really lacking right now. Like we should really do a bit more there. And this is to do with the simplicity thing. It's like, how is it easy enough to, as simple as possible to kind of visualize what's happening in those categories, and thinking, because the more you break it down, the more complex it is in terms of you need to understand loads more about the ecosystem to be like, this one should be about 2.6 million. So it gets more complex. The less categories, the more you'll make it's easier to make less margin of error. It's dealing with bigger numbers, you're not breaking it down really granular. So if it's off of 500,000, then what very good data would show it should be, it's less at the end of the world. You make it easier for that voter to be like, I can see there's a lot of stuff going on there. I've seen all the things going on, a little bit less than last time. And you want to bake that simplicity in as much as possible. So
can I share my thinking on that?
Hit me. Yeah.
Let me give you two answers in pretty much the same direction. if you would ask an 8-year-old whether they can describe difference, and they cannot, then we did get it wrong. That's the one answer. And the second one is sharing work experience, actually. And I hope you can relate to that one. So everyone is talking about cybersecurity. In our company, we managed kind of to screw it up by having product security and information security and data privacy and physical security and business continuity. And even the people in the company don't know anymore where they have to go in which scenario, because at the end of the day, if I would ask the customer, this customer says, I don't care how you organize yourself. I just want to know whether you are secure, So what I'm trying to say with that is don't overthink it. And if you cannot find the answer yourself and it's not absolutely clear if you have to think about it more than 10 seconds to explain it, then that's a good indication that someone else who is not in the same thought process don't understand what you're talking about. So to avoid this as a problem, the best is actually ask the people who don't know nothing about the ecosystem and put it in front of them, and whatever they think they can understand will probably be understood by everyone. Yeah, that's the way I would approach. Kind of don't try to solve a problem where the crowd more or less is more intelligent than we ever will be.
It also very depends on who presents something, right? When you have the right person, you can have a genius who is explaining a fucking difficult topic in such a smooth and smart way that even kids can understand it. And sometimes you have idiots who don't understand this, arrive to explain you what the garbage can is, right? Which can be kind of philosophical as well to explain a garbage can, but anyway.
So is that a dig at categories, Felix? Get over here. No, yeah, fully agree, Thorsten. I mean, I mean, it makes me point towards a more explicit thing for naming wise, at least when I'm thinking of these things. Like, I'm just trying to think, I always care about just trying to be as simple and explicit as possible. Like, but sometimes like simplicity takes thought to actually think about what is most simple. Like, simplicity is hard to achieve. Like, that's why it's difficult to achieve simplicity. Like, it can take thought to be like, what is the most simple option? And getting to that is yeah, I think it's important. Like, from naming to everything, all those little details add up. They make something that's either very clear to understand and very easy to be on board with, or
we have to get ourselves ready for 1 billion. If you have the time to explain to 1 billion what the difference between A and B is, be my guest. I think we will not have the time.
I'd agree. I'm definitely not the person for speaking.
You could have the speed.
I could have the execution speed of delivery, but maybe not the execution in general. Based on my after travel performances, I'm not a good. I like this setting. I can talk clearly now, but I'm not very good when there's pressure. And 1 billion people, I'll do it.
And to give you some tribute, it's a lot easier to criticize than to come up with something. So kudos to you, kind of, to get this discussion started and to put all the work in which you did put in. Just to make that clear, yeah, it's easy for me to sit here and kind of shred it. So take that with a pinch of salt and say this idiot doesn't know anything. I've put hours and hours in, and he's kind of turning it around.
So based on this conversation, I'd probably listen to you for about 3 hours. If you just want to chat for 3 hours and talk to me, I'm listening, because I'm hearing good shit. So you need to be more involved with Catalyst, please. We need you for sure. I mean, we need everyone, but like, you know, if I'm going to cherry pick, I'm going to cherry pick. Thorsten, you're in. Kidding.
No. Pick anyone else, kind of. That's fine. I'm getting kind of like heavy-headed. That's not good.
Yeah, I'm definitely stroking. I've given the. But what's it? Imran. Hey.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay.
Loud and clear.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Loved hearing everyone. Loved the conversation in this room. Actually, deep things, like people thinking deeply. That's always a pleasure to hear. Yeah, I joined a bit late, so I had to sort of infer what this room was about and what you were doing, what the work that you were doing. I think I have an idea on it. Like I'm guessing like you're changing the catalyst process to be properly defined categories that have a more that exist for longer rather than every time there being a challenge setting of the. I understand that. One point that I also like keep thinking about things and then I forget when the time comes to actually contribute. I can't remember and can't articulate as well as Thorsten, unfortunately. But one thing that we recently talked about was about how there needs to be how it needs to be simple enough that if you tell an 8-year-old, they need to be able to they need to have they need to grasp the overall concept at least right from the beginning, from the get-go. Maybe one solution to that problem would be to have differing levels of complexity to the process. So people who are actually involved in the process, maybe the proposers themselves, they have have different levels of complexity. So the voters or the person who's most outside the system, they only interface with the simplest system of organization. And then people who are more involved in the process, they have more options, and they like there's a hierarchy of complexity, and each person is exposed only because even with the complexity thing, there's trade-offs to every design decision. So you can have fewer categories, and sure, that will improve some things, but you're always, whenever you're making a design decision, you're always involved in some sort of a trade-off. So maybe one solution to that would be to have would be to have levels of complexity. So it's simple enough for the casual user. And I agree, like one of my first observations on the Cardano ecosystem was that there was just like I talked to a couple of people about it, how like there's a lot happening, but it seems like so it's in so many pieces, so it's hard to get an overall picture of it. So maybe like one thing would be to have levels of complexity where the person who enters first only sees what they need to see, and also it's in simple terms or whatever. Hopefully I managed to summarize it properly. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's spot on. I think it's like you can't always avoid complexity as well. Like, there's things like this, the categories that will remove a lot of complexity, but obviously there are concerns, and it's like you apply the same motto to all the rest of everything. It's like there's always, if you want to simplify things, there's this trade-offs, and there's also who's involved in the complexity. And I think this is the thing that we, same with with the contributors ideas, like, what complexity do they deal with? Like, there's certain decisions from governance decisions that make sense for these guys to deal with. And like, for instance, the contributors thing itself, what I'm proposing, it doesn't probably make sense for every single ADA holder to be voting on the one people, the individual people that should be hired for Catalyst. In the short term, it's a solution. It's using the existing system. It does what it needs to do. In the future, like how I actually think Catalyst eco contributors and that kind of ecosystem one, maybe that is just like an identity and governance kind of DAO, that could just kind of be like almost like self-run. So it's kind of like, the budget weighting is now between, let's say, Cardano DAO and Catalyst DAO, and they deal with the open source governance identity. So now there's only 4 categories, and they have like a process for the hiring, and that deals with the people who want to be involved with who to decide on who should be hired into this. Because the general ADA holders and the complexity of, you need to understand me, Felix, or like, who we are, like what our background is, all that kind of thing. Completely too much information. Like, like not every ADA holder should not be deciding whether I should be voted for thing, unless it was like a serious position of power, like a government official has, like, or presidents. That's a very different thing where you need to have. It's like a like a parameter change in Cardano. It's like one of those things that you just cannot make this wrong. I don't see Cardano in our governance systems doing that, but you wouldn't, for people who have very limited control. You're just hiring them into a micro democracy. Basically, a contributor will have its own, let's say, 50 people or whatever. That's a democracy, and so then the risk of hiring the wrong person is not the same. Where you've got to have like everyone vote for 50 people. That's super complex. So deciding where we add this complexity is the thing I think about a lot. Like you've got to think about every single decision that can happen and how often that happens. Is it a one time? Is it a continuous thing? And then who should be involved in that decision? And then the final thing is information flow. How is the right information coming to those people to make the decision? what information do you need to know to decide which contributors come in? What information do you need to know to distribute $5,000 of rapid funding? What information for $1 million for Orbis? The complexity, depending on the decision itself, is very nuanced, and you've got to think about what information. Like Brexit's a really good example of a real life decision where I don't think we had enough information. Like no one really had like a factual, objective report of here's all the implications of what happens in Brexit. If you improve that information flow of a decision that has to really go to the wider public, this is, you can't avoid it. You can't just delegate that to 20 people and go, just decide whether they're going to do Brexit or not, could you? It impacts people so much, you can't really just delegate that away easily. Like not to a point where it's going to make, it could have come to a better outcome, but is it democratic and fair? Like it's like, I think the better solution there would be to think, okay, we need to improve the information flow so everyone's informed and it impacts everyone. So it's just we accept it's a complex decision, but because of the like how it affects everyone, that's how we do it. So hopefully that's where things like Catalyst contributors and all the other stuff can lead to, is trying to decide what does the general ADA holder want to vote on? What do they have capacity to vote on? Because at the moment, even for me, an absolute like Catalyst fanatic, I do not vote on every proposal. I do not read every proposal. I can't change Catalyst and do what I want to do and read all that stuff. It's like it's too overbearing. I can't, even if I read it, I can't comprehend it all. It's just too much. So there's this DREPs thing and a mixture of these kind of solutions. We're going to have to decide on what, how people want to interact. They're just going to, I mean, this is another reason why I quite like categories for the DREP thing, is that if you have defined categories, then you could have like, I know Catalyst pretty damn well. So if you want to delegate to me or someone else who is in Catalyst, you could be like, well, I know they know the ecosystem well. So it might not be like a governance expert or a skill-based expert, but it could be like, an ecosystem-based expert where they know like, oh, there's already 5 solutions for that. So this, unless this can really say why it's, a step above, it wouldn't add that much value. And they would have that context because they're spending all their time in that area. So there is some merit to having categories just for that kind of delegate, choosing like, I'm just not going to deal with community challenges, or this, I'm just going to deal with, I'm going to vote for all my ones, but I'm going to delegate for these sections elsewhere because I just want to focus on making the right decision in that bit. Whereas when the challenges are constantly changing, you can't really like allocate and say, I'll let him deal with that if that bar is always changing and you don't really know how to define it. So good thought.
Let's be realistic about it. If 90% of all ADA holders are not voting, there's a reason for that. And a good reason for that is the motivation why they have ADA. Let's face it. Some people just invest in cryptocurrencies to make money, and they kind of trust or do not trust that they can or cannot. They're not really, so it's almost like I buy a share of a company. Well, what is the purpose of that? Because I want to have a return on investment, and I more or less kind of try to weigh certain risks. I might have a different approach to that. I want to be in for short term, long term. Some more or less kind of these people will never have an interest. I mean, I was a shareholder in a company I'm working for. I sold the shares. No, did I ever attend a single one of the shareholder meetings? Hell no, because that is too far away from me. So kind of like, while there might be an generic understanding of the ecosystem as such, they don't want to be sucked in either. If that kind of makes sense. Yeah. So we have to also take that one into consideration and say, there are different motivations where people more or less engage with Cardano. And the closer they want to be to the core of Cardano or Catalyst, the more involved they will be. And I think the main challenge which I see, and I look at it now from a Catalyst perspective, is when you come to the first town hall, it's just mind-blowing. Even that is mind-blowing. And then someone comes to you and says, hey, you have to vote on 1,000 proposals and you have to 500 ADA in your wallet. And by the way, you have to have this code, but don't lose the pin. The voting is going to be open then, and you say, I don't even know how my vote is actually making a difference. Is that like voting for a politician or what is it? So this fundamental principle of how we are bringing new people into Catalyst is quite crucial. I don't know. I have an observation, and my observation might be wrong, and it's kind of reflection on the current round. And we're in the middle of this proposal process, so it's not really calibrated. I have the feeling this time around, compared to the last founding round, it's a bit, how shall I say that without more or less judging too much, that the proposals in itself are not as pushy as they have been the last round. Can I say that? Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Not say
in budget amount, or
no, in kind of like it feels a little bit. The last time it was more fire under this whole process, and what I can see is people
are more subdued.
Yeah,
It's
So-
less of fatigue.
we are
Which very
we-
price related.
we
I
are-
imagine.
we are kind of suffering perhaps from one phenomena, and I'm not perhaps analyzing it properly enough, which is on the one hand side, everyone who is in the ecosystem is so busy kind of getting the deliveries done for the funding round 5, 6, 7, or 4, 5, 6, or even further back, yeah, or clicked out already because they have their thing now running, and it's kind of like not the way to do stuff for them anymore. And on the other side, the amount which we more or less give away is getting bigger. So that in itself requires additionally people, additional human capital coming into this ecosystem so that we're getting fresh ideas in and that we can sustain growth as such, which means this barrier at the edge of Catalyst as such has to be as a low barrier as possible. And whatever we do now has to have that also in mind, that kind of like the guy who doesn't even know what Catalyst is today has to have an easy entry to get into the system and be successful with his idea if it's valuable. If that kind of makes sense what I'm saying. So, and this is
Yeah.
what we have to kind of drive now, because otherwise this thing is going to implode because everyone is too busy delivering on what they intended 2 rounds before. And I can see the stretch with some people already. Yeah, we say, I don't have any time. I don't have any time. Don't talk to me. I don't have any time because I have to deliver on the 5 promises I made before.
Yeah, this is kind of somewhat I kind of cover in the Catalyst contributors thing, is like as soon as, because we're posting ideas, it's like you get attached to the idea, and if you don't deliver that, then it's kind of like that's your reputation. And like I'll have an idea, post it, and be like, well, I can try to do this, but I know I understand the environment, and I know it will be very difficult to push it across.
Yeah.
And that's why, like, I think I've been funded for things. But even if I did this really well, executed well, it's a very good product. There's no process in which for me to make this kind of like substantial in the community, because there's no authority. It's like the community already says the community makes the decisions, which basically means just decision paralysis. It's like you just got to, for a very small amount of funding, get something both executed and then massively adopted. It's like it's next to near impossible. And as soon as I realized that, and after trying numerous things, it's the incentives, it's the bottom infrastructure that needs to change here. That's what Catalyst contributors came from, followed on by this kind of these categories. Like I just want to be paid to work on Catalyst. It's like I don't want to be tied to an idea. Like I've been tied by my proposal to this idea. I do not care about the money. I just care about working on the thing that moves the needle. Like, and if that means that I'm not meeting my obligations by doing this proposal, I'll take that risk. But you can banish me. Like I'm working for free on this stuff, and I see this kind of thing with other people as well. That like you have this moral obligation to finish this proposal because you were funded for it, when that might not be the most impactful thing you could do. And that's a shame. That's a bad thing. Like if someone can see that it's not the right thing and they're worried about their reputation, it's like you're in this kind of like moral complexity. It's like, this was completely unnecessary. If people know that person adds value, and they should have the autonomy. Skilled people, just give them autonomy. You've got a talented person, they'll move over to what needs to be done. Like it's like they have the intelligence to do it. So yeah, I think we're very, very aligned on some of those thoughts. There's another thing that I had a response to, something you were mentioning, but again, I forgot it. So it'll come back to me in a minute. What was it? It's gone. It's gone in the wind. Anyone else? Peter, my man.
That was spot on, Thorsten. I
Easy.
really appreciated that. And yeah, it's really cool because you can see how you guys, Thorsten's seeing it now, how I saw it when I came in like 6 or 7 months ago, and then how I've been able to work my way into now being able to do stuff for Swarm in a capacity that pays me money. And it's not like enough to like pay my entire bills on yet, but it's like a sure step up from volunteering for the last 7 months. So I'm really excited about that, and I hope to be able to create some opportunities for other people in the future, and I'm working on that in this funding round as well, inspired by George over here around Christmas time when he came out with the Cardano contributors, and now it's the Catalyst contributors. So yeah, super cool to be in the presence of these generations of ideas that we're talking about here.
Too many ideas. Too many. It came back to as well. On what you were saying, Thorsten. I'm a simplicity maximalist, basically. Like with governance, do not expect, like even if it's a big decision, you have no way to make me vote for it. Like even for like prime minister, whatever it is, people still don't turn up to vote. They still, even though it's like very almost factually important, like this will impact you. People still have, don't won't always vote, and that will apply. That does not change. People choose where to spend their time. And the key thing, I think, that the governance stuff is you want to make it as easy as possible to vote on the things that you care about. And then that could just be, I just care about gaming stuff. Like if that is the thing you care about and you want to vote in that community, you just want to make it easy to vote in that. Because like there's no point pretending that you care. You have to care about DeFi. You have to get this. It doesn't matter. Like if you only care about something, no one's ever going to force you to vote on something. So the thing with Catalyst and this and that is like, how can we just make it so easy? And not just be like, reduce the complexity wherever possible, but make it easy and accessible just to vote on the things that you care about, that you want to be involved in. If you want to go to the next level up and learn about this, that, and the other, and do an extra contribution for whatever reason, whether it's financial reward or status, or whatever, then you can do that. But it's always just all case of like keeping it super simple for that governance. So people are just like, I just want to be light, get this going to vote, get vote for on these things. I want it to be super easy to know the information. I care about it, but I don't want to spend like 3 days having to like go through dregs and dregs of like my documentation on Gitbooks is a good example. I just want to know the information I need to know to be something I care about. If I want to go into the weeds on it, I will. Like, great, but simplicity is just so important for governance because it's just like it's a time sink. It's like it's another thing. There's so many things in life to choose from. Like voting all the time, is that something you want to do? Like it's a trade-off. Like some people might, some people will live to vote. I mean, that's fine. But it's just a rule to apply to everything. Like if you can make things as simple as possible, people can do more. People can just do more things. They can spend their time on this for a while, then something else. And there's nothing bad that comes from keeping things simple and add complexity where it's needed. But if not,
Probably going to hate me for what I'm saying right now, but
I'm ready. I got a standing desk, so I'm always study ready.
One of the most successful apps out there is kind of swiping to the left and swiping to the right. I'm not going to say the name, but you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, it's a simple decision. Yes,
Catalyst,
no.
catalyst
Yes,
voting.
no.
Catalyst
Yes,
voting.
no. Yes,
Up,
no.
up, down, up, down.
Up,
Yeah,
down, up, down. Yeah.
love gaming, all of it.
No, but for whatever reason, kind of that's the way how things in the outside world out of Catalyst work. Yeah, so even Facebook was kind of like started with this principle. So do we like it? No. Does it engage? Perhaps. Is there merit in it? Don't know. Perhaps we have to look at it. Yeah. Does it have to be the final decision? I don't know. Perhaps we have to kind of get more of the pulse of the masses in a gamified way to understand what really is relevant and what makes people tick. And to be very truthful, and this is what's coming more and more to me, probably Felix can talk more about it than I can. Cultural difference has also an influence on what you want. And I mean, there was one comment which I saw in one chat, which is, you don't really understand how Africa is thinking. And I have to say, yes, I don't. I have no clue, zero. Whatever I design might be totally wrong for that. Yeah, so this whole process, how it stands at the moment, seems to be very laborsome. And the question we have to ask ourselves is, how can we make it less laborsome and increase the impact? That's kind of my driver on that one. So therefore, I appreciate what you're doing.
Imran, floor is yours.
Yeah. Also on that, on the left or right decisions, there's an interesting trade-off again, even in there, because on the one hand, you want the most engagement you can have, so you want to have the gates be as simple as possible, but at the same time, you also want good engagement. So you want invested in the engagement. You don't necessarily want everyone going left or swiping left or right just because they're bored, because then that level, like the difficulty of engagement, also acts as a filter for the quality of engagement. So again, there's again a very difficult trade-off to negotiate there, and even that itself is not that easy of a decision, I would say.
Can I quickly answer on that one? I agree with you. I agree with you. But the point is, we are evaluating the effort which we are putting into something at the very, very end when we put it in front of the community. We've never asked the community before, and all the effort went in. Yeah, so someone writes a proposal, then there is a challenge team who is kind of trying to help out. Then we have community advisors, we have veteran community advisors, and then we have effectively a ballot on something. And the community says, this is a brilliant proposal, but it's a dumb idea, I don't like it. Oof. Yeah. Would you really spend all the time if you would know that a lot earlier? So what I'm trying to say is we're trying to crystallize everything kind of in this final voting stage. Perhaps we have to be a bit more intelligent with the crowd knowledge to understand what people think, the common knowledge, what people think makes sense. And it might just be a trend which they're following. Yeah. At the end of the day, you might feed that. If you would know at the very beginning that 5 or 15,000 people said, this is a good idea, I vote for that idea, and you know, compared to others, your idea ranks quite high, wouldn't that make more sense putting the energy in to write a proposal and make sure that it's good than if you more or less put the idea out in front of a lot of people and 3 vote for it, even if you think that's the best idea in the world? This reality check from my perspective comes after a lot of effort at a certain moment in time, where then the person who you asked for a decision is just overwhelmed. Honestly, I look at this and say, the application sucks. The amount of votes I have to cast are too many. And at a certain moment in time, it doesn't matter how idealistic you are, you have to give up, because there's no way in the world in the time frame which is set to make that many decisions. Even a manager who takes 150 decisions a day would not be able to kind of get through that. Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is, like, is that process at the very end really very inclusive? And how can we make it easier?
And how does it ever lead to the best outcomes? Like if it's not well informed and that you really understand what you're voting for, is it ever a fully informed decision, or is it just kind of like it's the power on community advisors right now is exceptional? And even though like I had like loads of people understood Callus, there's a lot of work went into it. The state of the proposal of when it got reviewed, it wasn't as clear at the time I submitted it, and because of the weight of the voters, 5-6 people, the rate where it goes, it seals the fate. It seals the fate because that rating, people only ever, they look at they always read the top ones because it's the first ones that come up on the list. So the power of those 5-6 votes and community things is just exceptional. And the thing is, community advisors have no guarantee that they're any more knowledgeable than the voter. So they get paid as someone has no guarantee that they're any more knowledgeable than me to influence my decision.
To be honest,
So
I ask you,
I'm slightly reserved on it.
who of you went to the page 25 on a Google search to click on a link?
Well, on
If you search something on Google,
yeah,
you
exactly.
get the results. Who's going to the page 25 and is clicking on the link? I mean, come on, guys. Let's have a reality check. Yeah, so yeah, there might be the one odd out. I'm not disagreeing with that one, but the vast majority reads effectively probably the page 1, perhaps 2, if they don't find the right stuff, and then you give up.
Yeah, and this is where it comes back to the simplicity of that. We're very, very, very much trailing off categories at the moment, but I mean, it's all in good fun and kind of. I think the thing to do with the community advice things that if I had the time to do the assessment on it is I would be looking at every single thing you can review, you could look into as like a thing on a proposal, and then the things that are objective and just like factual, it's like that's just it's yes or no, and then the things that are subjective that need someone who's got a level of experience and what the requirements are for that experience to dictate an outcome. So you can actually have, there's much more for the objective factual stuff. There's much more as automated as possible. There's so many things you can do on that front, and then that could actually lead to rankings and things like that that are actually much more meaningful, that are mixed with some of these directing funding approaches I mentioned earlier. I'd like to see those things kind of go into the voting thing. So you could be like, here's someone who's written a priority proposal, and here's all these kind of similar to the challenge setting kind of thing, but it's just that she focused on solving this problem. Here's the proposals that are relevant to that. I can click that and see all the proposals, and then one button. I know the person who's reviewed all this stuff. I'm just going to agree with all that, or I read them. So this is the thing, like you want to be, as well as simplicity maximalist, it's like choice maximalist. It's just like, if you just know the person, you just like, I know this person well. He or she looks at things in depth. Yes, or I just like reading these anyway. I will go in and read them. So the choice of where you want to apply attention is up to you. You've been given different information flows of how you want to make a decision and how you want to do it. So at least that process is just like as streamlined, as aligned with what you value as makes sense. And that it's not easy, but presenting that each of the different types of information in a way that people can just filter or find it or group it or whatever and make decisions much more swiftly is the only way I see the scaling. Like it's just, yeah, I mean, we will lead to that anyway, just because of necessity, but doing that really well is what's the difference between just, something that kind of works that people are half engaged with to something that's actually making really good decisions. Like it's been very well thought through. Anyone else who hasn't been? Right, you've got two screens, Imran. You're two people. This happens every now and then. It's the double person. Now.
Should I explain myself?
So I execute one of you. You're only you can't be doing this civil attack on this Zoom call. You don't get 2 votes here. It's one opinion. You've got to split that opinion into one.
That's a really bad civil attack, by the way. Like both names exactly.
Well, I mean, it was complex enough. It was one video on, one video off, and you had me gone for an hour. So that just goes to show.
Yeah, true, 100%. Yeah, my issue is I'm really connected to my laptop. But the thing is, I love my laptop, and I specifically got this laptop because I had a really specific set of requirements. But for some reason, it doesn't have a webcam. So I really want to use my laptop for this, but I have to use my phone for the camera, and it gets complicated this way.
Yeah, I've been there. That's it. I mean, that's basically the story of the MacBooks, where they decided to get rid of everything for a few years. Like, we're just going to get rid of all these ports. Like, you may have wanted them, but simplicity. I mean, there's an example of the simplicity thing where sometimes it can be it went against the choice maximalist side. You want to have choice but simplicity. There you go. Speaking shit again. Speaking shit. Yeah. I don't know if you wanted to say anything, Nana or Ashton. Everyone else has spoken briefly, at least. Josco, you've not said anything since the beginning.
I found the insight section a little bit disappointing. I had presented my idea to the pre-funding, pre-everything on idea scale, and only got limited interaction. None from community managers. There was no one there to suggest anything to help. So that was disappointing. So I think there could be improvements there in participation from everyone in the Catalyst team.
Yeah,
but
you've nail on the head there. So IOG just have no capacity at all to spend time going through that and really kind of they're much more reactive on what the community kind of pushes forward to some decision paralysis kind of way, where there's kind of like a group of somehow very, very hard for the community to do that anyway, but they just have no time. And then community members, most of us are just rammed with all this stuff we're trying to do. So the insight sharing thing at the moment is just, and especially as it goes away, it's just like people ignore it after a while. It's just hidden away. Unfortunately, it's like it can result in good things, but like I think your chance of that happening are under 10%.
Yeah.
Like I think 10% would be generous. I mean, even 2% may be generous. I'm not too sure, but
right.
This is something that I mean, not to shill Catalyst contributors every fucking minute, but I will again. This is perfect for Catalyst contributors. Really, it's like they are incentivized just to help the ecosystem, and there is more manpower. So if you had one of those people going through the insights and saying which of the ideas and makes sense, this, that, or the other, things we need to make aware of, they could come in, they could present that at the town hall. Like something like this needs to be talked about, and someone could be like have that responsibility to bring these things forward. So it's really a manpower problem, and
right.
People who actually have accountability just go like we're just trying to find all the problems, bring it all together, aggregate this information, and present it, information flow again, bring it together and just present it. This is what's happening. Here's what could change, ideas, problems, data.
I have every faith that we'll get there. We're evolving, so we will get there.
That's the bullishness I need to hear. I'd agree. We are going to make it. Okay, we are going to make it. I need to change my background to wag me, but I don't have a picture. Here we go.
I think a lot of the idea sharing stuff it happens in the like swarm sessions or after town hall stuff, like the same sort of concept where you're trying to throw out your ideas and get some feedback on them. That's sort of what happens when we're having our conversations. So it's a lot more effective to have interactive conversations than to post something on idea scale.
Yeah, I'd agree. This is why I record these, because I need to go through it again, because there's some actually really good ideas in this conversation. I need to go through this conversation again at 2x speed because I like it fast, to then turn some of these ideas into actions, because some of these conversations are great, but no one's going to go through this information. Just like the insight sharing, no one's going to go, like, it's just the people who feel some responsibility to bring that forward just have to do it themselves at the moment, like unincentivized. You just have to like keep pushing, finding the good ideas and banging the drum, really, which isn't scalable, but I'm going to add you. Nice. And I saw a message for Catalyst contributors in the chat.
Beat you.
You slimy legend. Okay, I've replied to Thorsten on Telegram. I've posted the link. Anything else? Is there anything else on categorization we need to talk about? Because it is, I love talking about the other stuff, but I also want to make the categories change or some sort of change as much as I can. I can't think of anything else for the cover. I think the main thing for it is I just need to bring as much of the voting into these after town halls and try and push IAG to have some of these decisions just go through as much like consensus and feedback flow as possible, just to minimize my burden of me trying to push a change through that's just my fault, because there will be a mistake. So I think we're in a good place with it. Better. Well, unless anyone has anything else to say, I might do the whole call it situation. So how are the other rooms doing? How do we do? Usually, in many previous times, I've done it to the last one. Not out of choice, just that's how it goes. No, there's 3 other rooms that are still alive. We are 4th last. Good
Okay.
effort.
Yeah. Thank you guys for it was really good hearing everyone. It was one of the favorite. It was really a pleasure to hear everyone's thoughts. Thank you, everyone. And yeah, I'm gonna hop off. Hopefully catch you guys again in next rooms, and I will give Catalyst contributors a look as well to properly see what it's about rather than inferring from your conversations.
Before you go, let me throw my, I'm just going to throw my Discord into the chat. If you have anything you're thinking you've missed something here, I don't get this, or anything that's confusing, or you just think it's a better idea, throw it to me on Discord and I will go through it like a ton of bricks. That's not the phrase I want to use, but I'm going to go through it like a ton of bricks. That's it. I'm going to get it. So yeah, yes, throw things at me because I'm just trying to take feedback for everything as much as I can. So.
Thanks lots.
Yeah, brilliant. Good room, George. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Cool. Stop recording.